Mr. President, I have one more topic I'd like to talk today. It's another important one, and it's one that many have been talking about here on the floor of the United States Senate. Many who have spoken very eloquently about this topic, and depending on when they've spoken about it, this year, this week, last year, a decade ago, a century ago, it's a topic that is really fundamental to this institution. And it looks as if members are trying in this institution to change the institution forever. And now I'm talking about the filibuster. Mr. President, as you know, there has been much talk recently about the possibility of getting rid of the filibuster. This is an action that will fundamentally transform this institution, certainly, but I believe, frankly, it will transform our country. And I don't think this is a wise move at all. And the irony is, and I'm going to talk about it, until very recently, the vast majority of my colleagues, Republican and Democrat, were in agreement on this topic, that getting rid of the legislative filibuster is not a wise move for the Senate, not a wise move for America. Now, Mr. President, this might seem like an insular issue, something that people in Washington, D.C. get incensed about, wound up about, but that people back home might not necessarily care because it might not impact them. But I don't think that's the case at all. This rule, the filibuster, is at the very heart of what keeps extreme legislation pushed by a small minority of the public from passing. It's a rule that in the Senate certainly encourages, if not demands, compromise and bipartisan work, both when one's party is in or out of power. Now look, our instincts, all of our instincts as senators, is to get things done for our state, for our country. But what's good for Alaska isn't always good for Colorado. And what's good for Colorado isn't always good for New York. What's good for the majority isn't always good for the minority, and vice versa, and isn't always good for the nation. That's the heart of federalism. And it's also why the majority can't wield unfettered power in the U.S. Senate. With the exception of a few laws, what is required here is typically 60 votes on legislation. And it's what separates this body, the Senate, from the House. For the good of the country, if you look at our history, we must work together, find compromise, find consensus, find solutions, particularly on major legislation, to get it broad-based and buy-in from all Americans, or most Americans. And this is what the filibuster has required. Now remember, the framers understood that here in the Senate, we would be different from the House. We would be the bulwark against what James Madison called an anchor, a necessary fence against the fickleness and passions that pervade the House. No offense to our members in the House of Representatives, but as George Washington is said to have told Thomas Jefferson, the framers created the Senate to cool House legislation. It was the cooling saucer you had with regard to the tea in the cup. Indeed, the Senate, often referred to as the world's greatest deliberative body, from its earliest days was founded on the right of unlimited debate. That's what the filibuster is. Even in the first session of the Senate in 1789, senators used this right to debate and debate and debate in order to delay consideration of legislation. Now, it wasn't until the mid-1800s that this tactic was coined, the filibuster, but the point is, this procedural rule in the Senate has been here in one form or the other since the founding of the Republic. And when you hear my colleagues talk about it as some new, recent procedure, it's just not factually accurate. Before the 1900s, there was no formal procedure to even end debate if a senator chose to talk a bill to death. It wasn't until 1917, during a debate about arming merchant marine vessels during World War I, that the Senate established the, quote, cloture tool, giving the body the ability to end debate by a certain margin of senators. Now, as some of my colleagues have been debating recently and have mentioned, throughout its history, we've seen the filibuster, cloture, used for good. We've used it to stop legislation, and it's also been used for ill, to delay much-needed historic reforms like civil rights legislation during the 50s and 60s, which was filibustered, that legislation, by Democratic senators until the filibuster was finally broken in the 60s. It has also been used for many other purposes, but members of both sides have used it for centuries. In fact, one scholar's account was that the very first Senate filibuster was over a bridge across the Potomac River. Not sure why, but I guess it was an important issue back then. So slowing things down, cooling passions, that's what this body was designed to do. And that's what this procedure has done for decades. And that's why my friends on the other side, who are undertaking a push to get rid of this, need to think. They need to stop, they need to think, and the American people need to understand the consequences. And our good friends in the media covering the Senate, they need to write some real history about this. Now, Mr. President, as my friends on the other side of the aisle know, this is one of these issues that actually, when the shoe was on the other foot, we did not take action. What am I talking about? Well, recently, Republicans held a majority in the Senate. And recently, with President Trump, we had a Republican in the White House, and there was frustration, and they wanted to move things quicker. And the President Trump, was pressuring many senators, let's get rid of the filibuster. We didn't. We didn't. We told the President that's not a good idea for the Senate, and that's not a good idea for the country. That's what we did when the shoe was on the other foot. We said no. Not good for this body, not good for the country. The Republican president was pushing, we need to get things done, we got to get rid of it. No. Let me just read a few of the things that were said recently about the necessity of keeping the filibuster. My friend from Delaware in 2018 said, I'm committed to never voting to change the legislative filibuster. Now, they said that when a Republican president was in the White House. My friend in 2009 from New Jersey, my colleagues and I, everybody I've talked to believe the legislative filibuster should stay here, and I will personally resist any efforts to get rid of it. My Democratic friend from Montana said, not just a little over a year ago, I'm a no on changing the filibuster. The move to make the Senate like the House, I think, is a mistake. I could go on, Mr. President. I don't want the Senate to become like the House. The consequences of getting rid of the filibuster are too great. These are all words spoken by my colleagues very recently on the other side of the aisle. Now, Mr. President, even more impressive Just a few years ago, we had 61 senators, 33 Republicans, 25 of whom are still here, and 30 Democrats, 27 of whom are still in the Senate today. They sent a letter. I have it right here. I'd like to submit this letter for the record.
Without objection.
They sent this letter to the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, and the Democratic leader, Senator Schumer, and they said, we have to maintain the 60-vote threshold for filibusters involving legislation. This is sent in April 2017. Now, what was going on in April 2017? Republicans had the majority, and President Trump was pressuring us to get rid of the filibuster. We said no. This is what the letter said. Regardless of our past disagreements on that issue, we are united. Remember, 61 senators, 27 Democrat senators who are still here, just 3 years ago, said this: we are united in our determination to preserve the ability of members to engage in extended debate when bills are on the Senate floor. We are mindful of the unique role the Senate plays in the legislative process, and we are steadfastly committed to ensuring this great American institution, the U.S. Senate, continues to serve as the world's greatest deliberative body. Therefore, we are asking you to join us in opposing any effort to curtail the existing rights and prerogatives of senators to engage in robust, full, extended debate as we consider legislation before this body in the future. That's the letter. 27 of my Democratic friends said, don't get rid of the filibuster 3 years ago. Where are they now? Why is it when this topic only comes up that Senators Manchin and Sinema are the only ones that the media focuses on? How come they're not asking the questions of the other 25, 1/4 of the entire body, who wrote this letter? What happened? Where's their conviction? When the shoe was on the other foot, we said we're not doing it. But they now want to do it. Nobody's asking them. I think the media should take a look at every senator who signed this letter 3 years ago and say, hey, why did you change your opinion so quickly? 3 years ago, you were adamantly against the filibuster, getting rid of it. What happened? Could it be that you now have power and you have, but we didn't do that when we had the power, when we had the White House. It's a really important question, Mr. President. Actually, it's so important, I would welcome any of my colleagues who signed the letter, Democrat or Republican, come on down. Explain to your constituents. Explain to the American people, why did you switch so quickly? And what do you think it's going to do to the structure of the United States Senate and literally to our country? Mr. President, what strikes many of us is how in so many issues people change their side, and it happens on both sides, when people are holding power from different perspectives. Let me provide another example that even hits our media friends. In 2004, when George W. Bush was president and Republicans had the majority, they were evidently considering to get rid of the filibuster. They didn't. And the New York Times wrote the following, quote, the Republicans see the filibuster as an annoying obstacle, but it is actually one of the checks and balances that the founders, who worried greatly about the concentration of power, built into our system. It's New York Times saying the founders built the filibuster into our system. People who call themselves conservatives should find a way of achieving their goals without declaring war on one of the oldest traditions in American democracy, the filibuster, unquote. That's the New York Times. And so, Republicans heeded the advice of the New York Times. Doesn't happen a lot, but it did. So let's see where the New York Times is on this one just about a month ago. Quote, "The filibuster is a centuries-old parliamentarian tool that has been transformed into a weapon for strangling functional government. The filibuster must go." Well, so much for the New York Times' convictions. I wonder why they're changing their tune. Probably the same reason, Mr. President, that some of my Democratic colleagues are changing their tune after signing this letter. So I'll end with one final quote. This is from a politician we all know well, all very familiar with him. It's from a speech on the Senate floor by U.S. Senator in 2005, U.S. Senator Barack Obama. He spoke about how the American people expect their politicians to work to create a more perfect union. What they do not expect is for one party, be it Republican or Democrat, this is former Senator, former President Obama speaking right here on the floor, to change the rules in the middle of the game so that they can make all the decisions while the other party is told to sit down and keep quiet. Sounds a little bit like what's going on with this filibuster debate. I understand the Republicans are getting a lot of pressure to do this meaning get rid of the filibuster, from factions outside this Senate chamber, but we need to rise above the ends justifies the means mentality, because we are here to answer the people, all of the people, not just the ones who are wearing our particular party label. That was Senator Obama, former Senator Obama, former President Obama saying, 2005, don't do it, Republicans. You have the power, you have the presidency, you have the Senate. Don't get rid of the filibuster. Well, I couldn't agree more with our former president. And again, Mr. President, when we had the ability to do this, just 3 years ago, we said no. I hope our friends in the media will write about this. Don't hold your breath. But here's one instance when the shoe was on the other foot because it was so important to America, so important to this institution, we declined to make the power move. It would be really good, whether it's President Obama, who's spoken out about this now, or the New York Times, who's changed their tune, or all 25 of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who signed this letter 3 years ago saying, don't do it. Come on down, speak to the American people, tell them why you've had such a drastic change of heart. But I'll tell you this, if we do it, you're going to regret it, we're going to regret it, the American people are going to regret it. And you know what, Mr. President, in my discussions with some of my Democratic colleagues, and I'm not going to name names, they know that. They know that. They're getting a lot of pressure. Majority Leader Schumer is getting a lot of pressure from the far left. Don't let the far left ruin this institution. Don't let the far left bludgeon you guys into changing America. Because I think deep down in your heart of hearts, especially all of you who signed this letter 3 years ago, know what the right thing to do for the U.S. Senate is, and the right thing to do for the United States of America is, and it's to continue to keep what the Founding Fathers devised for this body.